Daniel's heart pounded as he entered the community center, his steps echoing through the empty halls. He was there for a simple and noble reason, to bring a bit of joy to the children who didn't know the comfort of a home. As he walked carrying bags full of toys, his thoughts wandered far away to a painful past he was trying to leave behind. Then, in the midst of the silent room, he saw her. A small girl holding a faded stuffed rabbit. Their eyes met, and for an instant, the world around him seemed to disappear. She had the same deep eyes and sweet expression he loved so much. It was as if time had stopped, trapping him in a moment of pure anguish and hope. But before he could react, before he could approach her, memories came flooding back, like waves crashing against rocks. He remembered Sarah, his beloved wife, and the happiness they had shared before cruel fate separated them. He recalled the moments of tenderness, the shared laughter, and the dreams they built together. His mind went even further back to days of struggle and uncertainty when they were trying to conceive a child. Sarah went through countless medical appointments, painful treatments, and shed countless tears. But they never lost hope, never gave up on the dream of having a family. Then finally the long-awaited news came. Sarah was pregnant. Their joy overflowed, and they eagerly awaited the arrival of their precious baby. When Lily was born, it was as if the sun shone brighter, illuminating their lives with a radiant light. But this light was quickly eclipsed by the darkness of the nightmare that followed, Lily's disappearance. The void she left tore Daniel and Sarah's hearts to pieces. They searched for her tirelessly, but time passed relentlessly, leaving no trace of her whereabouts. Now, before that little girl in the community center, a flame of hope rekindled within Daniel. Could it be possible that after all these years of suffering, he had finally found his lost daughter? Miss Evelyn, a kind woman with soft wrinkles telling stories of a life dedicated to caring for children, approached Daniel with a warm smile on her lips, her eyes gleaming with genuine joy at receiving the generous man who had brought some light to brighten the gray day of the community center. While Miss Evelyn thanked Daniel for his generosity, he looked away for a moment to greet her. When his eyes returned to the spot where the little girl had held the stuffed rabbit, she had disappeared. A sense of discomfort pierced his soul, as if something had slipped through his fingers. He had no time to dwell on his thoughts, for the joyful sounds of the children filled the room. They gathered around the bags of toys, their faces lit up with radiant smiles as they chose their new treasures. The room was filled with laughter, shouts of happiness, and a contagious energy that warmed Daniel's heart. While the children delighted in their gifts, Miss Evelyn showed Daniel a table full of sweets and treats prepared in his honor. Colorful cakes, decorated cupcakes, and mountains of chocolates made his eyes shine with nostalgia for simpler days when life was just a succession of happy moments. Despite the joy radiating around him, a persistent shadow loomed over Daniel. The image of the little girl holding a toy wouldn't leave his mind, for he knew with bitter certainty that the toy belonged to his Lily. Even as he endeavored to cheer the community center children, a part of him remained fixated on the hope of finding his lost daughter. At the end of the party, when the excitement had died down and the children began to say their goodbyes, a blonde-haired girl with bright eyes approached Daniel, holding the toy with a shy smile on her lips. Her name was Emily, and she radiated an innocence that touched Daniel's heart. With a gentle gesture, Emily hugged Daniel tightly, thanking him sincerely for the wonderful party he had provided. His heart warmed with the child's genuine gratitude, and he returned the gesture, placing a soft kiss on her forehead. However, his eyes never left the stuffed rabbit she held. He observed every detail, every worn seam, trying to find a clue, a sign that the toy could be the same one he had given his beloved daughter years ago. Emily's soft touch brought him back to the present moment, but the doubt persisted in his mind, a silent shadow that would accompany him until he discovered the truth. Back at home, Daniel recounted everything to his wife, Sarah, with renewed hope shining in his eyes. But instead of sharing his excitement, Sarah reacted with coldness, her expression hardened by pain and time. She interrupted him impatiently, refusing to listen further, her cutting words echoing in the suffocating silence of the room. She scolded him for getting too involved with the party, for allowing himself to dream when reality was so grim. Daniel's heart broke at his wife's indifference, but he held back, swallowing the bitter taste of rejection. Respect Sarah's pain, he repeated silently to himself, even if it meant stifling his own hope. That night, Daniel plunged into a whirlwind of painful memories as nightmares dragged him back to the day Lily disappeared. It was a sunny afternoon, one that heralds the arrival of spring after a harsh winter. The city was alive with festive energy, the tempting aromas of crepes floating in the air. The family was together, enveloped in an aura of happiness and anticipation. Sarah, enchanted by the cheerful atmosphere, decided to take a crepe home as a symbol of prosperity for their business. While she walked away to make the purchase, Daniel and Lily stayed on the beach, enjoying the sun and the gentle breeze. Lily, with her childlike innocence, ran among the toys, her contagious laughter filling Daniel's heart with joy. He watched her with a loving smile, losing himself in the simple beauty of that family moment. But then the phone rang, interrupting the afternoon's tranquility. Immersed in a personal call from a friend, Daniel barely heard the voice on the other end of the line as he struggled to concentrate. When he finally hung up, a shiver of panic ran down his spine. He hadn't seen Lily for some time. His heart pounded in his chest as he searched frantically for his daughter's familiar face among the crowd. When Sarah returned, crepe in hand, her question about Lily hit him like a bolt of lightning. With a trembling voice, he replied that she was on the beach with the toys, but when their eyes met the empty spot where Lily should have been, the world around him seemed to crumble. Despair took hold of him, his body trembling with anguish as he ran back and forth, shouting his lost daughter's name. And so the nightmare began, leaving deep scars that would never disappear. A month had passed since Daniel's visit to the community center, but the image of that little girl holding the stuffed rabbit still haunted his thoughts. He couldn't shake the doubt consuming his heart. How could that child have a toy that belonged to his daughter? The police had never found any clues about Lily, and the lack of news gnawed at his spirit. Sarah's coldness, her seeming acceptance of Lily's loss as a permanent mourning, only intensified his own pain. Daniel refused to believe his daughter was dead. He held on to the hope of finding her alive. Determined, he decided to return to the community center, this time with the excuse of bringing notebooks and children's books for the kids. As he was known for his generosity, he was warmly welcomed by Miss Evelyn, who let him explore the place at his leisure. But Daniel had a different purpose in mind. He needed to find that little girl again, to know where she was and to talk to her. As he walked through the corridors, observing the children busy with their activities, his heart raced. Every face, every smile, every laugh seemed like a step closer to finding the truth he so desperately sought. He headed to one of the rooms where some children were drawing. His eyes scanned the room until he finally saw her. Emily, sitting in a corner, focused on her drawing. The same stuffed rabbit was beside her, and the sight of the toy made Daniel's heart race. He approached slowly, trying not to scare her. When she looked up and saw him, a shy smile lit up her face. "Hi, Emily," he said softly, trying to hide the urgency in his voice. "Do you remember me? I brought those toys last month." She nodded, her eyes curious and innocent. "Yes, I remember. Thank you for the party." Daniel smiled, feeling a pang of emotion. "I wanted to ask you about your stuffed rabbit. Do you like it a lot?" Emily hugged the toy to her chest, her smile widening. "Yes, it's my favorite. Can you tell me where you got it?" The question came out almost as a whisper, but he knew the answer could change everything. Emily thought for a moment, her small eyes narrowing in concentration. "I've had it since I got here. A lady gave it to me. She said it was special." Daniel's heart nearly stopped. He needed to know more. "Do you remember the name of that lady?" Before Emily could respond, Miss Evelyn appeared at the door, calling the children for a snack. Daniel felt time slipping through his fingers, but he knew he couldn't be hasty. "Thank you, Emily. You're very kind," he said, gently patting her head before stepping away. Daniel's mind buzzed with questions as he left the community center. He had found a clue, however small, and he knew he wouldn't rest until he uncovered the whole truth about his daughter and that mysterious stuffed rabbit. The confirmation that the stuffed rabbit belonged to Lily flooded Daniel with a mix of hope and despair. For 8 years he had searched for his daughter as a little girl trapped in memories of a distant past. But now, he needed to adjust his search to a young teenager. With renewed determination, he returned to the community center, resolved to share everything with Miss Evelyn and seek her help. Upon arriving at the community center, He was greeted with the same hospitality as always. However, this time there was a weight in his heart he couldn't ignore. Miss Evelyn guided him to her office, a cozy space filled with children's books and toys. "Daniel, it's good to see you again. How can I help you today?" she asked, sensing the seriousness in his demeanor. Daniel took a deep breath before beginning. "Miss Evelyn, I need to share something very personal. My daughter Lily disappeared 8 years ago. On my last visit here, I saw a little girl, Emily, with a stuffed rabbit that belonged to Lily. I'm sure of it." Miss Evelyn's eyes widened, surprise evident in her expression. "My God, that's terrible. How can you be sure it's the same toy? I recognized every detail, every little mark. My wife and I bought that stuffed rabbit especially for Lily. It has a bow with her name embroidered on it. A unique gift. I need to know how that toy got here, and what the connection between Emily and my daughter is." Miss Evelyn's empathy softened her features. "I understand, Daniel. Let's find out together. I'll check Emily's records and see if we can find any clues about who brought her here or any relevant information." She stood up and began rummaging through the files, searching for Emily's record. Daniel felt his heart pounding with anxiety, hoping this search would shed some light on the mystery surrounding his daughter. After a few minutes of searching, Miss Evelyn found what she was looking for. "Here it is," she said, handing the file to Daniel. "Emily was brought here by a woman named Grace about 2 years ago. We don't have many details about Grace, just that she claimed to have found Emily alone and abandoned." "Grace," Daniel repeated, trying to recall if the name was familiar. "I need to talk to Emily again. Maybe she remembers something more about Grace, or how she got the stuffed rabbit." Miss Evelyn nodded. "Of course I'll call her. Let's see what more we can discover." Moments later, Emily entered the office, her look curious and a bit apprehensive at the seriousness of the adults. "Hi, Emily." Daniel began with a reassuring smile. "We need to talk a little more about your stuffed rabbit. Do you remember anything else about the lady who gave it to you? Grace, is that her name?" Emily thought for a moment, her eyes fixed on the stuffed rabbit she held. "Yes, she took me in and fed me. She said the stuffed rabbit was special but didn't tell me whose it was." Daniel felt a mix of frustration and hope. At least now he had a name and a direct connection. "Thank you, Emily. You've been very brave." After Emily left, Daniel turned to Miss Evelyn. "I have to find this Grace. She's the key to discovering where Lily is." Miss Evelyn agreed. "We'll use all the resources we have to find her. We won't give up until you have answers." Daniel left the community center with a new mission and a renewed flame of hope. Now he had a concrete lead, and he wouldn't rest until he found Lily and reunited his family. Daniel returned home with a pounding heart, knowing he needed to share the new discoveries with Sarah. He entered the room where his wife was sitting, flipping through an album of old photos, her melancholic face reflecting 8 years of uncertainties. Seeing her like this strengthened Daniel's determination even more. "Sarah," he began softly, approaching her. "I have something important to tell you." Sarah looked up, her tired eyes meeting his. "What is it, Daniel?" He sat beside her, taking her hands. "Today at the community center, I confirmed that the stuffed rabbit Emily was holding is really Lily's. Miss Evelyn and I discovered that a woman named Grace brought Emily to the community center 2 years ago. We need to find this Grace." Sarah, who initially seemed skeptical, began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. "Do you think this could lead us to our daughter?" Daniel nodded, his eyes shining with renewed hope. "Yes, Sarah. We have a real chance of finding Lily." With hearts intertwined by hope, Daniel and Sarah began their relentless search for Grace. They researched records, talked to people in the neighborhood, and followed every available lead. Weeks passed in a marathon of investigations and interviews until finally, a name and an address led them to a modest flower shop in the city center. On the decisive day, they arrived at the flower shop with nerves on edge. The bell on the door chimed softly as they entered, the sweet aroma of flowers filling the air. Behind the counter, a young, beautiful woman with blonde hair tied in a messy bun served customers with a warm smile. Daniel and Sarah knew that this was Grace. With hearts in their throats, they approached the counter. Grace looked up and smiled, unaware of the whirlwind of emotions stirring the couple before her. "Hello, how can I help you?" she asked, her voice gentle and welcoming. Daniel took a step forward, his voice laden with emotion. "Grace, my name is Daniel, and this is my wife Sarah. We came to talk to you about a girl named Emily, whom you took to the community center 2 years ago." Grace's smile faded, replaced by an expression of surprise and apprehension. "Yes, I remember Emily. Why are you asking about her?" Sarah took a deep breath, her words breaking with emotion. "Our daughter Lily disappeared 8 years ago. The stuffed rabbit that Emily has belonged to Lily. We need to know everything you can tell us about how you found Emily, and if you know anything about our daughter." Grace remained silent for a moment, processing the information, her eyes filling with compassion as she realized the depth of the couple's pain and hope. "I found Emily wandering alone on the beach. She was abandoned and hungry, so I took her to my home and cared for her for a while before taking her to the community center. She never spoke much about her past, but there was something special about her and that stuffed rabbit. She always said it made her feel safe." Daniel and Sarah exchanged a look filled with expectation and fear. "Grace, do you have any idea where she might have come from? Could you help us find Lily?" Grace thought for a moment, her brows furrowing in concentration. She vaguely mentioned a place where she used to play, a park with a large fountain and many trees, but she never said exactly where. And once she talked about a house with a red door. Sarah raised her hand to her mouth, trying to stifle a sob. "My parents' house has a red door. Lily used to play there." Daniel felt a surge of hope flood his chest. "Grace, please, can you take us to the park where you found Emily?" Grace, visibly moved by the situation, nodded. "Of course I can. Let's go right now." They left the flower shop and followed Grace to the park where she had found Emily. Upon arrival, Daniel and Sarah began exploring the area with renewed determination. They showed pictures of Lily and slowly, fragments of information began to emerge. Finally, an elderly woman who lived near the park remembered a girl who looked like Lily and who used to play there years ago. She mentioned a house with a red door where the girl had been last seen. With hearts racing, Daniel and Sarah followed the lead to the mentioned house. When they arrived, they saw the red door the woman had described. They knocked on the door anxiously, hoping for a response that could change their lives. The door opened slowly, revealing an elderly woman with a welcoming smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. Sarah, her voice choked with emotion, asked, "Please, we're looking for our daughter Lily. Have you seen a girl that matches this description?" The woman looked at the photo, and her face lit up. "Yes, I know her. She lives nearby with a family who found her. I'll take you to them." They followed the woman to a simple house not far away. When the door opened, Daniel and Sarah held their breath. There stood Lily, now a young teenager, looking at them with the same eyes they would never forget. "Mom? Dad?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you would come to find me." With hearts overflowing with joy and emotion, they embraced, finally reunited after 8 years of pain and separation. The hope that had never abandoned them had turned into a miraculous reality, bringing Lily back home. The elderly woman who had guided them to Lily looked at Daniel and Sarah with a mix of joy and sadness. She knew this moment was inevitable and at the same time dreaded. "My name is Helen," the woman began, inviting them into her modest home. "I found Lily 8 years ago, alone and scared near the park. She didn't know her full name or where she came from. She only had that stuffed rabbit and a smile that melted my heart." Sitting in the small living room, Daniel and Sarah listened intently as Helen continued. "I never called the police because I was afraid that if she was taken to an orphanage, she might go through what I went through. I was an orphan myself. I grew up in an orphanage where no one ever wanted to adopt me. I was abandoned and knew what it felt like to be unwanted." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "Every time I thought about calling the police, a deep pain took over me. What if her parents had abandoned her? What if she ended up in a place like I had, without love, without a family? I couldn't let that happen. I decided to take care of her, to love her as my own daughter. And she started calling me Mom." Lily brought light into my life, a life always marked by loneliness. Helen paused, looking at Lily with tenderness. "I knew that one day you might show up. I hoped you would. But as time passed, I grew to love her presence in my home more and more. She was my joy, my reason for living. I couldn't bear the thought of her being hurt or abandoned again." Daniel and Sarah listened to every word with tears in their eyes. They could feel the depth of love and concern Helen had for Lily. She wasn't a kidnapper but a savior, driven by fear and love, who had protected their daughter all these years. When Helen finished her story, Sarah approached her, holding her hands. "Thank you, Helen. Thank you for caring for our daughter, for loving her when we couldn't. We understand your fear, your trauma. You saved Lily and made her feel loved and safe." Daniel nodded. "What you did was out of love. We understand that your fear was that Lily would be abandoned again. We are grateful for everything you did for our daughter." Helen cried with relief and emotion, feeling that the burden of her fears was finally being shared and understood. Lily, now reunited with her biological parents, hugged Helen, calling her mom once more, acknowledging the unconditional love she had always received. The house that once was a refuge for a lost girl and a lonely woman now became a symbol of love, compassion, and the strength of hope. Together, Daniel, Sarah, Lily, and Helen found a new form of family, united by destiny and the love that transcends time and circumstances. Dear viewers, if you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day.